So again, thank you everybody for joining us today. We're going to kick this off here with a look at our agenda. Today we're going to be looking at common issues with collaborating with manufacturing and architects. We're going to look at issues and ramifications around stale and inaccurate data and how the technology stack is aimed at addressing those. We're going to look at ensuring design requirements are met, issue tracking and resolution concerns, coordination and clash detection and large-scale projects, and also how to circumvent compensatory budgets with avoiding expensive change orders. So this is actually kind of a new updated version of our presentation. So I kind of put a nice little image down here that we're now in flavor enhanced with 2023 content. There's some nice changes that came out in the 2023 product line that we're going to talk about inside here as well. Our key takeaways, though, will be to help you understand ways to provide critical BIM information to building system designers, explain techniques of consuming and identifying changes to project data, and to develop bi-directional communication between Revit and Inventor and understand the technology. Also to understand the communication process and importance of tracking markups and issues in a project. And it's important to remember that this is a kind of a large net that we've cast for these Elevate sessions, where we have folks from not only the manufacturing sectors, but also the building sectors. So we're going to take this in a little bit of a way so that everybody understands kind of where the other person is coming from. So it helps really add to the communication effort between these collaboration type projects. So I myself am a manufacturing expert, first and foremost. Brian is more AEC or architectural. And this is something we put together to better, I guess, remove the gap of questions between the two disciplines. So as we go through this, some things might seem rudimentary, but again, that's for the benefit of the different side of the aisle that's going to be in our webcast. So we're going to start off here, though, looking at the inception of a project and the importance behind that. How to start using the technology stack to set up the importance criteria for your project. And with that, I'm going to lead into just a little bit of vocabulary building. This is just something that we hear a lot in the industry when you're dealing with large scale projects. One of those is the idea of a Greenfield project. So when at the inception of a Greenfield project, it's typically nothing exists, there's no building, a grassy field, if you will. And it gives you the opportunity to implement brand new state-of-the-art technology, provides you a clean slate for new technology and infrastructure development, so you can do some really fantastic things, because you have no compulsion to work on the constraints of any existing system or infrastructure that might have been in place because it's an empty field. The disadvantages of this, though, is if you don't have clear project direction, your degree of risk for these projects is much higher, and they can take a long time. Some of our clients are starting to want to reduce Greenfield builds from 4 years down to 2 years. And how do you do that quickly? How do you make sure everybody gets on the same page? So since all aspects of the new system need to be defined, this whole process can be quite time consuming. It may be hard to get everyone involved to make these critical decisions in a decent time frame to keep your project moving. Now, when we talk about Brownfield or renovations, you have different challenges there. So it gives you a chance to add improvements to existing technology, but you also have to support working within a defined business process and technology solution, right? Allows existing assets to be reused, so you don't have to have something come in that doesn't exist, right? So generally these renovation type projects are a lot faster, but it does require a thorough knowledge of existing systems. It requires detailed and precise understanding of all the constraints of that build, so the project doesn't fail. And dealing with legacy infrastructure can not only slow down development because it's legacy, it's old, it might be outdated, but also to the overall development costs. So if you have to retrofit something to put your new technology in or your new equipment in. Okay. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to turn this over to Brian to speak. I'm going to keep advancing through the slides for him though. And we're just going to talk to you a little bit how about we start this project inside of the Construction Cloud.
Excellent, thank you, Mark. I appreciate it. So I'd like to start off in talking about the Autodesk Construction Cloud, specifically the unified platform. Now, this platform was released February of last year. It is the up-to-date and current version of cloud software or cloud access through Autodesk. You'll see quite a few different things inside of here. The most important thing that I want to comment on is that blue ribbon you're seeing throughout all of the offerings, the document management portion. This becomes critical because your manufacturers will need access or licensing to Autodesk document management module inside of here. This is what's going to allow them to access and communicate and share files with you. As far as the design team, the Revit authoring team, they will be in the collaboration side or the collaboration portion, collaboration pro portion of this module. Next slide. So as we're looking at trying to share data and workflows for sharing data back and forth between manufacturer, designer, design intent to manufacturer, we really need to talk a little bit about level of detail, or LOD, level of deliverable associated with that. Level of detail, even though manufacturers really do care a lot about the ins and outs and pieces and connections inside of their product, for example, here is a chair, you'll notice we have different generic representations. The lower the number, the lower the level of detail. The higher the number, the higher the level of detail. The more physical information we're seeing and metadata. The key important thing here to understand, other than just what the model looks like, is what metadata is encapsulated inside of that content. The same thing is true with the workflow that Mark and I are going to look at. We're going to look at delivering an entire assembly line, a bulk of information. So Mark's going to go over how to control how much information is being shared inside of that. Next slide. As we're looking at this platform, the Docs platform, I'm going to walk you through permissions, adding Mark in, what level of software access he has to have to it. And keep in mind, we do have the ability to control what folders and what content manufacturers, or in this case, Mark, would have access to be able to see. And I'm going to walk you through that and show you how to assign him docs and permissions level inside of it. Next slide. Getting our data out to the manufacturer. In previous versions, we were put into a process where we had to share the entire model or all the information. That required manufacturers to filter through and understand and know what information to turn on and turn off to be able to see the concise area or product that we're looking at. New in the 2023 software, I can actually share a view that becomes a direct link to my model. So if I do updates, Mark will see that. I'm going to walk through the process of publishing a published settings to control what views will be visible, and then ultimately going in and creating a data exchange view for Mark to be able to absorb and bring in that information. Next slide. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take control now for just a minute and walk you through some of those processes and kind of show you what's going on. Mark, can you make me presenter?
Yep, I'll change this over to you. So as what you're going to see here and what Brian's going to show is, this is really geared at making sure at project inception for either Greenfield or Brownfield type builds that people are brought into the loop of understanding the data that's current and relevant, the environment that you're working inside of. It's going to be a little bit more cohesive than email. So let me go ahead and pass this over to you.
Right now I'm logged into a factory layout project. This layout project, as a project administrator, I get the ability to add members inside here. It's very simple. All you have to do is know their email address, send them out an invite. We can control it in that fashion. Now, Mark, in this case, I'm going to get out of the add area and just look at the marks. I can set him up what company is he a part of? What role is he going to play inside of here? Is he a project member or an account manager or a project manager inside of here? You'll notice that blue thread I talked about, Docs, Autodesk Document Management, I am only giving Mark access to the Docs portion inside of here. As designers, we don't have to share all the files with them. We only have to share a small subset with our manufacturers. Moving a little bit forward, I'm going to go into my document side and look at the folder structure here. One thing to keep in mind, this is a folder structure. When you set up your project, you can control what's happening inside of here. We can add as many subfolders and folders inside of here as we want to. We've chosen to put it into design models, and I've kind of broken it out into two teams. Under the architectural side, you'll see I have my Revit models that I'm actively working on, and then I've got a manufacturing folder inside of here. Manufacturer is where I want to give Mark access. So with the simple permissions, I get the ability to add Mark. And you'll see I've added Mark and given him full level of access to it. To add people, you simply type in their email address, company, or role, and then I can control what level of visibility he has into that folder. In this case, I gave him full manage capabilities so that he can add any subfolders he might want to, or any amount of data or markup, any data inside of it. So let's talk about the process a little bit of getting my Revit model up here and available for people to work on. So I'm going to switch over to Revit here. Now, in this Revit platform, I've already browsed out to the hub using my Autodesk docs and the project itself. I want to go ahead and open up my project from the cloud. We'll give that just 1 minute to access here. One of the key things I'm going to point out here is when we take a look at the views, we can have a lot of information inside of here. Mark really doesn't care about the outside shell of the building. So I want to go through and duplicate a view and create a specific view that is going to be for him to bring in or link into his Revit model to be able to see that data. And this view is going to become important here in just a moment. Now, to make this view visible inside of the construction cloud, I need to run through some settings. So don't forget, you have to publish it. You have to create inside of your publish settings a set here and pick the views you want to be a part of that set. Once these views are generated, go ahead and synchronize your model. We'll want to go ahead and save it and close out of it. And to publish this data, we're going to go back to the opening page. This is a change to 2023 software. You used to do it inside of the collaboration tab. Now you want to actually go find your model here, and over at the ellipses button here, we can publish latest. I have already got a most current published version up there, so I don't have to do it. If you had done saves, it would prompt you to go ahead and publish latest. The key thing is this is not publishing from your computer. This is published from the synchronized cloud-based model inside of it. That's why we always want to synchronize after we create that publish setting. Now that that's been taken care of, let's take a look at how we're going to generate a view inside of here. I'm back on the construction cloud. I'm in my folder, and you're seeing my up-to-date manufacturing start and model. I'm going to open it up inside of my viewer and take a look at it. Over on the left-hand side, we're going to see our sheets and views that are available. These are the views that I chose. And I've got a specific view here, production B, working. Accurately represents the space and the content that's important to the manufacturer. Instead of giving him the whole file to work on, I'm going to go and create a data exchange. Now, the key thing about this data exchange is that it's going to be a link directly back to this file. And I'll show you that here in just one moment. It's identified that there's 807 objects inside of here. I can give it a unique name if I want to, but more important, where do I want to save that? This is where I get the ability to separate Mark from having control of my information into just his folder. So I'm going to select the manufacturing folder, and I'm going to go ahead and create this exchange. Now, this is going to take a few minutes. Depending on the amount of data, it's going to generate an image in a background. When I close out of the view, You'll notice, and I go to manufacturing, processing right now, but we're now seeing that view is showing up. The Autodesk Construction Cloud is going to take a few minutes to process this. We'll just give it a moment here. Every now and then, it's not a bad idea to run a refresh here, but you're going to see a unique icon with 2 arrows that shows it's a bi-directional link to the architecture. You'll also notice this says version 1. This will be the first time it's been available. If I make changes to the area and publish a new set, this view will update for a month. Excellent, Mark.
And I think it's important to remember too, from what you saw there, from what Brian showed, is that the Autodesk Construction Cloud and that platform is sort of like the vault for Revit people. Inside of Inventor world and Vault world, our Revit data typically doesn't belong there. We typically don't put Revit data in there. So if you can draw kind of a parallelism between the 2 products, and for data management, the Construction Cloud is to Revit as Inventor is to Vault there. Now, those technologies can also start speaking to each other between Vault and the Construction Cloud. I think it's important to note that as well. But the reason why we show a lot of that Construction Cloud is because that really is the gospel for a lot of Revit users. Wouldn't you agree, Brian?
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah. So now let's take a look at the project engineering side of this. Being added to Brian's project, I actually would have gotten an email, and it says I'm actually able to access this project. I have access to certain folders inside of there, so I'm now part of that project. And he's created the data exchange. I need to learn how to consume his Revit data in my manufacturing product, because I need to do 2 things. I need to create fabrication drawings, which I'm going to do in Inventor, because I have tighter tolerances there than you can ever have in Revit. And I also have to produce some data back to him to check against his Revit model. So let's take a look at that. We're going to begin with a little bit of a history lesson on this endeavor that Autodesk has taken over the last couple years and its advancements in the software. Starting with Inventor 2020 and older, you could actually create some file exports from Inventor, but you couldn't really bring in Revit data. So you could export RFAs, which are Revit families. You can, such as toilets and sinks, things which are consumable content in that way. You can also create ADSK files. You can export SAT files, and that's typically how you would get data back into Revit previously. To bring Revit data into Inventor, you had to do some really convoluted things with SAT files, and it was never clean, very large and unwieldy. And there was never any link to the data whatsoever. Now in Inventor 2021 and newer, they've started with more enhancements over the last couple of releases. So with Inventor 2021, they introduced the AnyCAD technology with Revit so that I can bring in an RVT and I can see it and work with it from Autodesk Docs. And if Brian were to change that Revit file in any way, mine would update. It would tell me you have an update pending. Would you like to refresh it? So I can say synchronized with his data. In Inventor 2022, we had the ability added to actually create Revit RVT exports. Now, an RVT is a Revit family, or not family, it's a project. So I can actually save out an entire RVT project for him to consume. And then further enhanced in 2023 was this idea of data exchanges, that view that Brian had just created there to really narrow the focus of what I need to look at. And we'll talk about these differences. There's also been enhanced simplification inside of Inventor to make my deliverables back to Brian easier and smoother for him to consume. And it also involves working with something called model states, previously known as level of detail inside of Inventor. And also the integration with the desktop connector, which makes the connection to the Vault environment in the Construction Cloud, as well as Inventor in the Construction Cloud, a reality. So let's talk a little bit about Revit data usage in Inventor. Now, if I have the AnyCAD technology and I bring in a full Revit model, so let's say Brian trusts me with the entire building, I can bring that in, but I have to basically pick and choose what to turn on and off. So that's nice technology, and it operates slightly different than data exchange. But again, that gives me a narrower focus. I can really say, you know what? Brian says I only need to look at this area of the building. That's all I should care about. I don't need to care about anything else. He doesn't want to give me that data. That's fine. The Revit file creation in Inventor, when you go through this, and I'll demonstrate this, you need to turn off the Revit model first, otherwise you can basically duplicate things back to Brian. You can create the RVT basically with the simplify command. So that's been enhanced. It's one of those enhancements I talked about. And lastly, there's also a nice update there too. So if I were to change my model, add some more walls or add another piece of equipment, add a new station in a work cell, then I can click an update button and it maintains the link to that RVT I'm creating. So he will stay synchronized with my efforts. Now for file management, again, there's kind of two ways to do this, depending what kind of world you live in and how you like to track your data. First and foremost, there is a project sync functionality inside of Vault Professional that allows me to take files that are in my Vault and synchronize them to the construction cloud, to the Autodesk Docs system, or I could just use Autodesk Docs directly. So what's really different here is the use of Autodesk Docs, it's always going to stay in sync. Things are always going to be synchronizing back and forth. If you'd like to throttle that, you can do so with Project Sync, so maybe it only updates every 12 or 18 hours, as an example. So depending on how you like to manage your files, a couple ways to go there. So let's talk about what this data exchange is really doing, this newer piece of technology in 2023. Essentially, you have a source application, Revit, and you put it into Autodesk Docs. We saw Brian do that already. He created the Revit 2023 view inside of Docs. He produced a data exchange in that connector, and Docs holds that inside of it. Now, in Inventor, I actually have the ability to go into the construction cloud, into Docs, and say, I want that data exchange to come into Inventor. Data exchanges, even though it sounds like a handshake back and forth, is one directional. You go from Revit with your intent of going to Inventor. And these data exchanges are getting enhanced. There's also data exchanges coming for Power Automate, things like SharePoint, things like that. But we're focusing here on the modeling data, of course. Now, in the Revit side, you can see exactly what Brian did there on the left-hand side. He said, I'm going to create just this area for Mark to focus on, right? So I don't need the skylights. I don't need the garage bay doors. My equipment should fit through there, so I'm not too concerned about it. And inside of Inventor, my job is to consume that, which I bring it in through the data exchange tools in Inventor, and then do my work, and then create an RVT for delivery back to him to check against. So if we kind of look at this a little bit closer, what is really the differences between bringing in the entire building versus the data exchange? Well, if you bring in the entire model, you're going to have much longer processing times in Inventor bringing in that data. I'm also going to need access to Brian's architecture folder, so I'm going to need access to his full model. He may not want to give that to me. And knowing what to turn on and off, if I'm an Inventor designer, typically I don't know what all these different categories or classifications inside of Revit that he has. So I'm basically coming in here and grasping at straws sometimes to get the data I need. That could be integrated as a workflow to Vault Professional, though. If you receive an RVT through, let's say, email or another sort of deliverable of just receiving an RVT in traditional means, you can put that file in the Vault and you could have kind of a workflow around it. And the way that you consume that in Inventor is you can consume it as a component anytime you want in your general arrangement. So I could be working on my equipment and then bring the Revit model in at any time, just placing it in like a normal component. Now, a data exchange being a little bit different here, and I actually really, really like this technology, is the fact that Brian can say, here's just a partial Revit model. The only thing you need to care about, I don't have to worry about what I need to turn on and off. I do get some restricted access from the building owner, so I don't have to see the entire architecture environment. And the downside with this is you can't use it with Vault Professional because the data sync has to connect the Docs. You can't bring a data exchange in from Vault. So you have to be connected to the Docs environment. Now, this methodology is a little bit different for utilization. So here you have to open the data exchange first, and that becomes your general arrangement. Then you start adding assemblies and components to it for your product. Both workflows, mind you, had to be still round trip to Docs, and that's going to require licensing for the Inventor user. So If you don't have docs licensing on the Inventor side of this conversation, you'll need to acquire that. The Autodesk Docs deliverable could be done through the project sync from Vault, or it could be done directly by you just saving it to Docs when you actually create the RVT. You do have to use the simplify command to create either RVT though for the workflow, and the consumption for your building owners. So if I give this back to Brian, it's going to require him creating a central file and linking then the new central file that I'm going to create for Revit. So it gets a bit technical, right? If you've never seen Revit before, we're going to show you some of those things. But these are basically some of the guidelines around these two different options. Now, if we look at the enhancements that were done to the simplification tool in Inventor, I really like this. I got put into a panel. You can actually save presets in here. You can tell it to remove certain parts by size. You can create envelopes for just space claims to really reduce that level of development back to Brian. Or if you need something a little bit more advanced, you can control that a little bit more intelligently. And you can do that through some built-in presets. So you can do things like model states, design views, positional views, showing your model in different levels of development. And then down at the bottom for output, this is where you would choose the file type. You would choose RVT, and you would save it out to the docs directory, or you'd put it in your local workspace, check it into Vault, and let project sync send it to Brian. So a couple ways to go there. Now here's a good look at model states. So these were enhanced in 2022 Inventor. And on the left-hand side, you can see something of really full detail. It's got a lot of detail to it, nuts and bolts perhaps. It's got a lot of openings for the machinery and things like that. Nothing's really filled in, if you will. So it's a little bit higher level of development. So what I would do as an Inventor designer is I would keep that in mind through the project scope, that I need to give him some sort of level of development back that he's asking for. So I can create some different model states inside of Inventor to really reduce that footprint, the size of the file footprint, if you will. And there's tools that we have, like link model states. There's ways that we can just say, remove, again, 10% of the components which are small in size, things like that. So we got some really nice things we can do in Inventor to meet that contractual criteria that Brian has put upon me. Now, when I put it back up to Revit, again, there's a couple ways to do it, as I mentioned, through the desktop connector and project sync to the doc system. A couple of things to remember about the size that you're creating of your Inventor projects. When that RVT gets created, you want to keep it under 400 megabytes. If it's much larger than that, it becomes hard for the Revit user to handle it. Now, if we're dealing with RFAs, which we'll see in part 2 of this series, RFAs are families. Those are like toilets and sinks and fixtures and things like that. Those things have to be much, much smaller. This being another RVT file, though, you don't have that small consideration. What's really nice about this, though, is everything's going to share a common insertion point. So you won't have to worry about necessarily dropping it in the wrong spot with your equipment. When Brian links it in, they'll be in the same shared insertion point. You will not have any connectors on this, though. So any of the BIM connectors, like cable connectors, water, conduit, you don't get that. You don't get OmniClass data, because we're not creating an RFA, we're creating an RVT. And it will be seen as a single entity inside of Revit when brought in, because I own it. I'm the owner of the equipment, that part of the project. So I'm the one responsible for updating it and adjusting it. Now, again, the file is not imported into the project directly, but it's linked, right? So when I make changes to my RVT, it updates in Docs through Project Sync or through just my manual update or automatic update, that is. But it does require you to have a Docs license. There are certain things where, from my engineering side of things, for the Inventor and fabrication side of things, having like a Collaborate Professional license might be better for earlier green builds or curtain wall manufacturing, when you have to see more of the project before things get turned over to you. So this depends on your project, it depends on your company and what you do, but keep that in mind. So let's take a look at some of these Inventor techniques. Here inside of Inventor, I currently just have my production line already good to go, okay? It's amazing how fast these projects work when I do them through a webcast. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to try the AnyCAD workflow first. So if I go up here and say on assembly, place, instead of placing from my Vault workspace, I'm actually going to go out to my Autodesk Docs directory. I'm going to find my project that I'm in. And in this scenario, Brian gives me a lot of trust, right? So I can go into the architecture area here and I can find the version that I want. I'll say open. It's going to download the latest version for me. Now, as you can see, this is the full building. There's a lot of data here. This is where the processing time can take a little bit longer. Okay. And with the AnyCAD technology, again, this has been around for a couple of releases now. The option I want to choose here is reference, so that when Brian makes changes, the reference automatically updates. Inventor says you have an update pending. Would you like to update it? I say yes. So I can stay synchronized with this full model. But again, look how much time it's taking to load this data. Okay, and once it gets here for the preview, now I have to know what things I want to turn on and off. Now, even if I choose the production B working view that he created, it's still bringing in 1,520 elements listed right there. Now 731, right? But it's actually preloading all this up in front, okay? And when I choose OK to this, it's going to say you have 731 elements. Let's go ahead and just make sure I'm logged into Vault. Don't tell anyone my password, it's super secret. Okay, loading in. And you're going to see the building will be attached to my cursor for the drop. And this is something you can do right now with 2022 Autodesk products. We didn't really mention it, but if you want to do data exchanges, you have to be on Revit 2023 and you have to be on Inventor 2023. If you want to use this AnyCAD workflow, then you can be on 2022 Revit and 2022 Inventor. See, it's definitely taking some time getting here loaded. And there it is. So there's my same data exchange that I would have seen for the next example I'm going to show you. But it's definitely, it took me longer to get there. Okay, and I'm just going to go ahead and drop it at the origin. And it shows the insertion point that I wanted. Okay, so look at the magic of CAN demos, right, guys? Now, as I'm looking at this, this is essentially my brought in AnyCAD model. It's one piece here. You can see a little cloud icon on my browser on the left-hand side. I can come back in here and turn certain things on and off that I still don't want, perhaps. I can also right-click here and see some options to break the link or suppress the link or edit that importation that I did. But this is definitely, a valid way to do it, but, data exchanges are so much smoother and newer, okay? So in that regard, I'll start a data exchange up here on my Collaborate tab inside of Inventor. I'll click on Data Exchange. Now here it's going to show the project. So here's my factory layout project. Here's my production B working, B1 that Brian had just created. And I'm going to go ahead and click on that. I could preview it. I'm just going to go ahead and load it. Notice I'm not going out to a file directory. That's the big thing here. I'm actually using the integration with Inventor to Autodesk Docs to my area that I'm allowed to look in the project that I'm allowed to be in. And I'm going to say load. So now it's importing that data exchange in for me. What's going to be nice about this is I won't have to choose certain things to turn on and off. The building owner has already told me what I should be concerned with. Now, if I disagree with that, I can go back to the construction cloud. We can have conversations in there and say, I really need to see these doors because I'm not sure my equipment can fit through there. So we can actually do some sessions, with markups and pre-planning, for a brownfield to make sure that my stuff can actually fit through the door, so I don't have to cut a wider hole. Okay, so there's my data exchange brought in. And what's interesting about this is when it's brought in, it kind of looks the same as the AnyCAD reference. It's got that little cloud icon there. I can come in here and check for updates, but I can't break the link. I can just check for updates. And this actually behaves like it's Inventor components. I actually have individual parts that I can click on and turn visibilities off. Okay. So that's actually kind of neat. And if I expand some of these things, let's find a component. So here's a component. This is a piece of ductwork right there that's brought in. When I look at its iProperties, and as you know, for Inventor users, this is how you can check metadata on that file. This actually shows up as an IPT file, but it actually has no size. So that connector inside of Docs is taking care of all this work for me. It's actually not creating IPTs for me here. Okay. So now I'm going to bring in my equipment. So again, this is kind of the opposite workflow from the AnyCAD methodology. But let me go to my crane project here and bring in my start. Okay, you can see this actually has that AnyCAD element on it because it's actually open in my other model. You just go over here and close that without saving. Do that again. Okay, cleared it, place. And here I'll just go ahead and place it at the origin. Nice shared common insertion point. Okay. So again, here I'm seeing some things going on. And one of the things that's kind of blaring to me right now is I do have a problem with the crane that I typically use for filling these totes. It's actually hitting the ductwork. Now, if we just talk about this for a moment in the grand scheme of things, right? One of our key takeaways today is understanding how these kind of problems can add to compensatory budgets. I'm not sure if you ever had to move HVAC ducting before, but that could be a $10,000 compensatory budget charge. It could be project delays. It can cause a lot of problems just by not having the knowledge of where this is. Now, if you're given a 2D AutoCAD drawing, you're just kind of shown this stuff. You may not get heights on things. So having this sort of level of intelligence about a current brownfield or interacting with people who are doing greenfield design can be a very, very smooth enhancement to your process. Okay. Now, I have two decisions here. I can make my crane shorter, or I can go back to Brian and say, hey, can you move your duct? Because maybe this isn't built yet, right? But these are all things we can discuss now. Now, when it's ready for me to send to him, let's say I fix this crane problem. I can do that just by changing the height of this guy, okay? I think we all understand how to do that with Inventor. But I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of speak to the simplification and delivery back to him. I'm gonna go up here to my simplify command up on the assemble tab. Let's go ahead and save this. It's a good idea. This is my data standard. So let's call it just GA. All right. I actually have a saved model state inside of this arrangement. So I'm going to show you just a few tools there quickly of how that operates. So let that finish saving. Because clearly, I don't need to show the openings. I don't need to show these lines on the crate. I don't need to show the tines on the forklift, right? There's certain things that just add to complexity of things. I'll just let these files check into my vault there quick. And again, with Project Sync, I can send this data to Brian if I need to send him certain PDFs or drawings of my fabrication prints as well, which is quite nice. Depends what your deliverable is. Brian, as I'm letting these files go to Vault, what would you say is this level of development for you? Is this like a 300 level or a 400 level?
I would say it's closer to a 400 level. We're starting to get mesh. We're getting connector components right now. Definitely overkill for what I want to see early on in the design process. But in the CD deliverables, it might be the level that I want to see.
Okay.
Level of detail changes depending on what phase we are inside of the project. Earlier in the project, the more generic matching spaces I want to see. Later in the project, as we get to final as-built drawings, we want to see a high level of detail.
I think so. Almost done. So what I'm going to do next here is I'm going to go up to my production B interop here. This is my equipment. And one of my model states in here is actually medium. Let me go ahead and double click on that. You can see it actually reduces a lot of that extra detail. Like I closed up that machine there, got rid of some of the faces on the container, some of the ribs that were on there. And now essentially I want to make sure that this can link, because maybe I have multiple models inside this, multiple work cells that I need to transfer to Brian. So what I'm going to do is go up here to my model states for the GA here, and I'm going to create a new model state. And I'm going to call this one medium, so it matches the same name there. So with the medium model state, I'm going to make sure these get linked together. So there is a link model states command inside of Inventor where I can link these together. This command used to be called link levels of detail in previous versions of Inventor. I'm also going to link the primary ones together, which is a little bit more detail. So this gives me at the top level the ability to switch from primary to medium and automatically adjust these sub-assemblies that also have the medium level of detail, or medium model state, if you will. Okay. So now when I go to medium, the other thing I want to do is actually turn off this data exchange so it doesn't get sent back out to Brian. Now, Brian, what is your preference? Do you want this data exchange turned on so you can see where I laid stuff out for you? Or do you want just the equipment?
Let's go ahead and leave it on for this case so that we can communicate back and forth and for purposes of time. But normally when you send your data back, you would want to turn off the data exchange.
Okay, so there's my model state set to medium. Yeah, because otherwise these same pieces of equipment will go in there. And we're going to save this as an RBT file. I'll call it GA Simplify 1. And if I want to check this into Vault and then have Vault use the project sync, I would put it in my local workspace and then just check it in. But in this case, I'm going to put it in my docs folder. And I'll put it in my manufacturing folder here, GA Simplify 1. I'll say OK. So it's using the smaller references here. Now, again, depending on how simple you want it, you can have model states, which are, just more boxes or envelopes in some sort of preliminary design. It doesn't have to be as complex as I've made it, but we're just imagining we're further along in the development cycle for this project. Okay, so we'll finish exporting that model up. And while that's finishing, I'm just going to go back over to our slide deck. And the next thing we're going to talk about is markups and issue tracking. So, Brian, I'm going to pass this over to you to kind of take a look at this.
Okay. My construction cloud at this point in time?
Yep.
Excellent. So right now, Mark has went ahead and shared a file with me. You'll notice that there's a little spinning icon here. It's being processed right now. And there's also a log file, XML log file. I'm going to go ahead and skip this one, and I'm going to go into one pretty much the same thing that we've already created here, the data exchange file. As a designer, I want to look at it ahead of time and see what's happening. So utilizing the viewer inside of the construction cloud, since Mark was nice and left all my information on, I can start to take a look at it. So as I'm reviewing things here, I'm seeing, well, this one hasn't moved already, the ductwork, so I'm okay with that. Let's go ahead and zoom in back here. And you'll notice we're kind of tight in up against this column here. So I need to decide, is that an issue or not? You know, I could always pick up the phone, call Mark, or with the Docs platform, I have the ability to create an issue. So I'm going to call this a clash issue. I'm going to assign it somewhere specifically. So I'm going to pick right here. And now I can start to fill out some details about this. So what is this description? We need room here. I can assign this issue out to Mark himself so he gets notified that an issue's been assigned to him. I can also take a look at a watcher. Maybe there's an overall project manager that's a part of it. I'm going to add Caleb as a. Where is it located? Detailed location information about it. I can call out the piece of equipment if I want to. And ultimately, I need this resolved by Friday. I found the issue. It started becoming an issue around the 18th. And what was the root cause? All of these areas can be customized. Maybe we'll design collaboration issue. Now, in this case, I might actually have additional supplemental information that I want to include. So I can add reference files to this. So I get the ability to add potential photos, hand sketches, product cut sheets, you name it, can be added inside of here. So I'm going to go ahead and publish that. You'll notice I'll see a mark indicating that it's available. Now Mark will get an email and he can go on and respond to that comment. So one thing that's key to point out inside of here, there's going to be an activity log. Inside this activity log, I can track when Mark has updated it, opened it, any comments we have back and forth. It keeps a detailed history of our communication so that we know what's happening inside here. So with this data, how do I consume it? That's also another important component here. Ideally, we would not have my model inside of here. As I mentioned earlier, Mark would have shut that off. But consuming data, there's a few things we need to talk about when we're doing that. So looking at my architectural model, inside of Revit, I'm going to go ahead and open up the model again, and I'm going to run a very simple link of that data in. So everybody should be familiar that are Revit users that we can easily go ahead and insert and link in a Revit file. So I'm just going to grab that Revit file, go ahead and link it in. Now, a few things. When I bring it in from factory models here, I'm going to go into my design model categories, and I want to take a look at manufacturing. Notice I'm not seeing anything here. I'm not going to see that data because that file is not a central file. It has to be a central file to be able to consume it and bring it in. So the process for that is going to be opening his file, saving it out as a central file, and then linking it back in. We need to make sure we run through that process. Once we've created that central file, linked it in, we'll be able to see everything inside of Revit and communicate back and forth without any issues. As you're seeing inside of here. This happens to be another view I've created, but you can see all of this data is inside of here. This is the accurate one. The column is showing a problem. As long as I go through and run through my publish latest again, then when we go back to the cloud, I'll be able to take a look at my active model here. And I could do my markups directly inside of this view. Go here, that view, or the working view here could become our active markup communication file. Now, one thing to point out is this view, this model that we're looking at exists in the architectural realm. So when it comes to my architectural file and I look at the permissions here, I want to be sure to add Mark to it, but I don't have to give him full capabilities inside of here. I can edit his capabilities so he can publish markups, and maybe have him view, download, publish markup as a create level of permissions. So think of that more as a viewing level of permissions inside of my design folder. With that, Mark, let's go ahead and go back to the PowerPoint. I'll make you presenter.
Yep, and Brian, I went ahead and responded to your issue there as well.
Excellent. So this slide is really taking a look at what that interaction looks like when generating issues as a back and forth workflow.
Yep, so here I actually received an email, and here inside of the Construction Cloud, I marked this as pending for Brian to review, and I said that swing arm should not be a concern. It doesn't pivot that way. All right. So as we wrap up, obviously we did a lot of technical discovery around Revit and Inventor and how they operate, but the whole goal of this is help you to understand the ways that you can provide critical BIM information to those building system designers, to make sure that things stay linked for them, to make sure that they stay in the loop, to make sure that they get notified of changes as they're occurring. We also looked at explaining the techniques of consuming and identifying those changes to project data, right? That's when we were heavy in the software. So understanding that the technology stack can support workflows where you're trying to be a little bit more collaborative. Also looking at how we can do bi-directionality through different tools, such as the AnyCAD brought in or the data exchange brought in, and sending RVT files out from Inventor and how that gets consumed into Revit. And we also looked at understanding the general communication process and importance of tracking these markups. So again, if I can identify issues before they become actual issues in construction, I can save myself a lot of headaches, a lot of heartache, and a lot of time and money on my compensatory budgets. Now, going forward, IMAGINIT can actually help a lot with these sort of things. For instance, Productivity Now, we actually are going to be loading our webcast in there like we always do. And you can also go through new features for Revit and Inventor. We also have AUTODESK Construction Cloud Education inside of Productivity Now. When it comes to having someone help you write workflows and processes, or maybe contract language, or helping you understand how to create, better contract language to work with building owners or to work with building system designers. Ascent can actually help you in that technical writing and process documentation. IMAGINIT's professional services can help you with some innovative roadmap planning. At the start of a new project, listening to what you're trying to accomplish for either a Greenfield or a Brownfield, and helping you understand what it's going to take to make that project a success in the least amount of time possible. Looking at that type of workflow development, and of course, software implementation, and also reality capture for brownfields. We do a lot of work in the RCS or reality capture world for making sure that those current as-built are captured in a quick and efficient manner, and that you don't have to worry about, well, how stale are my as-builts, right? So there's a lot of ways we can assist, and of course, reach out to your friendly neighborhood salesperson if you have questions on that. And I'd like to thank everybody for their